Throughout his career, Don Luce has been acknowledged as a premier defensive forward and penalty killer, and was a frequent candidate for the Selke Trophy annually awarded to the league's top defensive forward. To Luce and line mate Craig Ramsey fell the task of negating Sabres' opponent's top scoring line, and the success of the Sabres' checking line was instrumental in the team's stirring drive to its first playoff appearance against Montreal in 1972-73. His goal totals jumped from 11 in 1971-72 to 33 in 1974-75. The outburst included a then NHL record 8 shorthanded goals, giving him a plus 61 rating and propelled Luce into the league spotlight as the winner of the Bill Masterson Memorial Trophy. Since 1985, Luce has continued to serve the organization in a variety of assistant coaching and scouting roles, including that of Director of U.S. Scouting. In 1986, Luce and Ramsey were inducted together into the Sabres Hall of Fame. Tonight, Don Luce joins his cohort forever enshrined in the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame.
"25 years ago, two men embarked on a thrilling and potentially treacherous adventure that would change the face of hockey. The first man was Don Luce, the Buffalo Sabres Director of Player Development, and the second man was me. My name is Jerry Meehan, and in 1989, I was the general manager of the Buffalo Sabres when I directed and participated in the defection of Alexander Mogilny from the Soviet Union to the United States. Some people that I thought he was probably the best player in the world in that draft that year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No question about it. I think the biggest thing was that, he was playing in Russia.
All the NHL scouts here are certainly drooling over Mogilny, but don't think he's going to be picked by anybody in June.
At the draft table, I said, all right, we've got this second pick in the 5th round. What are we going to do with it? And everybody else was throwing a player at me and things. I said, no, we're taking Mogilny. 5 months later, Mogilny and the Soviets captured the 1989 World Championship. The very next day, Don received an unexpected phone call that would change the future of our organization.
I got a call saying that Alex wanted to come out and come over and play in North America.
So you call me, I call Seymour Knox, the owner, and we agree that it's worth a flight to Stockholm to find out if this is the real thing.
All of a sudden the door bursts open and Sergei and Alex come running out and jump in the car, and then we take off. They had actually snatched him away from the Soviet team.
I knew that we were into something that we really had to be concerned about.
We started making plans to get to a different hotel and start negotiating about coming to North America.
There was some accusation floating around that we kidnapped him. We get to the airport real early, and we're on the first flight out of Stockholm for New York City. I go through first. I have no trouble getting through. Alex came next, which was the nervous part, because one of the reasons why we wanted to get out of town fast was the concern that because the Soviet team had already left for Moscow, that there would be an alarm set up for his whereabouts, whether it be by the local police or whatever security people they might have had. So we had to get out of there early, and then Don came through last. I know for a fact that if it had been one more day, we wouldn't got out of the country.
We had Jerry Meehan here a few years ago, and Jerry was talking about Mogilny. And I'll give you the backstory. I'm an attorney with Phillips Lytle in Jamestown here, but also Buffalo office. One of our partners was Bob Swados. Bob Swados was being counsel in the crease. He was the Sabres guy. And I was telling him the story that I was in Russia for a Nuremberg trial conference, because Robert Jackson was the chief prosecutor at the Nuremberg trial with the Russians. They had a conference in Moscow. I'm in the taxi, and I'm cruising down with my translator, because I'm going to be a speaker. And he goes, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Buffalo, New York." You probably don't know where it is. "I know where Buffalo, New York is. You stole Mogilny." You stole Mogilny. Which then I told that story to Bob Swados. Of course, he's general counsel at the time, and told me his angle of it. And it's in the book, Counsel in the Crease. And then Jerry's here, and he has a documentary, which you just saw parts of. It's a 25-minute documentary, and for those that were here when Jerry was here, you actually got a complimentary copy. If you don't have one, Don, I can make sure you get it.
I don't have one.
Oh, well, all right, I'll get my people on it. So, set the scene for a little bit of the title of the CBC documentary is called Defector. And you're in the middle of that. How did that all happen?
Well, it happened at the World Championships in '88 were in Moscow, and we covered them. That was the Iron Curtain was still up, and I happened to be there. And at that time, there was no Russians coming to North America to play, but Alex was playing and Fedorov was playing. They had a great team, and so that June we had, like Jerry said, we had an opportunity to draft him in the late round just in case he'd come over. So we drafted him, and the next year the World Championships were in Anchorage, Alaska, and of course we covered those. We went up there, and I between games, if your team's not playing, a lot of the players would hang around the rink and just watch other teams play. And so we were walking the corridors, and I saw Alex. I stopped him, and he said he couldn't understand English or anything. That's what he said at the time, but he could, really. But anyways, I gave him my card, and I told him that we had drafted him, and that, just call at any time if you needed anything. And he took the card, and so then the World Champions were in Stockholm, Sweden, so we don't usually cover those because they're usually people that are all drafted and so on. But anyways, after the Russians won the World Championships, they always stay in the country that they win it in, and they are given some currency to buy things to go home with. So they're staying later. But anyways, I was in the office in the old auditorium in Buffalo, and the phone rang, and actually it was a woman, her name was Lena, who was Sergei's agent wife, and she was Swedish. And she said, "I want Alex to come over." And Alex wants to come over. And I said, "Well, how do I know it's Alex?" And so she said, "Well, it is." But I had said something to Alex when I met him in Anchorage, and actually I kidded him about playing the Canadian team because they were playing them the next day, and I said, "Are you going to play better against the Canadians?" And he says, "I'll score 3." And he did. But anyways, so I asked him, "Well, what did he say to me in Anchorage?" And I heard him in the background say, I score 3." And so I knew it was him. I says, "Okay, well," I says, we'll be over, probably." So I went downstairs to Jerry's office, and that was about 10:30. 1 o'clock, we're on a flight to Stockholm. And we get to Stockholm, we check into a hotel, and Alex is going to be at Sergei's Fomichov, Lena's house. We're going to meet him there for dinner and start the negotiation stuff there. Well, we went to their house. Of course, Alex wasn't there. He was at the mall. They had taken the team to the mall to spend their money. And so we get a call from Alex because we were going to wait for him to come back, and he said, through the interpreter, Lena, said that we got to do it now. We're being watched. So we jump in the car, drive to the mall. First of all, we arranged for a side door where Sergey and Lena knew where there was a side door. And we said at 8:05 to come out. And we're sitting there coming out, we was waiting, and sure enough, the door flies open. Alex and Sergey, his agent, run out. They jump in the car, then some other people come running out, but we take off. And we drive actually a little bit, and then we went to the U.S. Embassy. Jerry went in to talk to the people in the embassy, and he came out, I don't know, 4 hours later, and said that, our lives are in danger, KGB is after us. That wasn't good to hear. But anyway, so we checked out of our hotel, and then we went to another hotel, and we stayed there for about 4 or 5 hours, and then we checked out of that hotel and went to another hotel. And then I dropped Jerry back at the embassy because he had to do all the paperwork about getting Alex cleared to come to the United States. And so we drove around Stockholm, and we stopped at a kiosk. Back then they had it's called a telephone kiosk, where you go in and there's a receptionist, and there's like 23 booths with a phone in each booth. And you would give her the number you wanted, and she would say, okay, go in booth 22 or whatever. So Alex went in, he wanted to call home. And so he called home, he was talking to them, and then he came out and he had this look on his face like something wasn't right. And so he was cut off, asked the receptionist to put him through again. He got through again, he was there like 5 minutes, came out, he says, we have to go, they know where we are. How do they know where we are? Right? He says, well, in Moscow at that time, every phone call that went to the Soviet Union at that time went to Moscow. His hometown was Khabarovsk, which is 7 hours flying time east of Moscow. It was like 2 hours from Japan. And so all the calls went through Moscow, so they knew where the phone call was coming from. And they knew, obviously, it was going to Alex's parents. So we jumped in the car and take off again. And, it went on like that for about 2 days. And in the meantime, Jerry got the paperwork done, and then we had to sign him to a contract. And at that time, he wanted $1 million. And Jerry offered him Pierre Turgeon's deal, which was the first overall pick, which was like $750,000 for 3 years. And so we talked about it. He said, I can't give him $1 million. I said, well, just give him $1 million, but just add a year to the contract. He doesn't know the difference, right? All he wants is $1 million. So that's what we did. We offered him $1 million, and away we went. But the thing people don't know is that he was sentenced to death for defecting from the army. His parents lost their jobs. His brother lost his job. He was, not treated very well at the time, and so it was pretty scary for him. And actually, what happened was when we got to Buffalo, we left the Buffalo airport. We had a plan where we brought 3 cars to the airport: my car, Jerry's car, and another friend's car. And the FBI was interrogating Alex in the basement of the airport for a while, but we knew that the press would be all over this. So we devised a plan that, 3 cars would come out and they'd go in different directions. And, I said to Jerry, they'll probably think he's going to your house, but why doesn't he come to my house? So he came to my house, and it's really funny, but during the time he was there, I wasn't home at the time, but my wife was, and Alex was actually working out in the backyard, and Diane, my wife, got a knock on the door. She went to the door, and there's this guy there, and he says, I'm a reporter, I want to talk to Alex. And Alex had just happened to come in, and he could see the door from where he was standing, but the guy at the door couldn't see him. And Diane was smart. She said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. He's not here. I don't know what you're talking about. And he left. And then when she shut the door, Alex said, that was KGB. I said, whoa, wow. So, you know, it was pretty, when we got on the plane, it was really, when we flew business class from Stockholm to JFK Airport. And it was, I'll never forget this, we were taxiing in and the pilot came on and said, no one is to stand up or leave your seat when we get to the gate. I repeat, no one's to stand up. So we get close to the gate, he repeats that message. So we get to the gate, and the doors open, and it's a 747, so two guys in uniform go down each aisle, shut off the economy seats, and 4 more guys come in, and then 2 more guys come in the suits, and they say, we're the FBI, and then they start calling our names off, and then we had to go with them, and Alex was interrogated in New York for, I don't know, probably 5 hours. But to this day, it's the most press that's ever been in New York, in JFK Airport for any event. Like there had to be 2,000, it seemed like, reporters and stuff there. It was phenomenal. But a side story is that when you defect, he had to, you know, his life was in danger, and but they take all his documents, you know, because he's got to stay in the States because he's defecting. So that next spring, the World Championships are in Helsinki, Finland. Again, I'm sitting in my office. I get a call. Alex is in Finland. He can't leave the country. How did he get there? So I got to get on a plane and go and get him again. Because I don't know, I still to this day don't know how he got out of the country. He had no passport, had nothing. But he got to Finland to see his buddies play at the World Championship. It was amazing, but yeah, he was a great kid, very, very great hockey player. John Muckler said he's probably the most skilled player he's ever seen.
So that's a segue. What you did there was clearly kill off a penalty that could have been very severe. So that's part of you. We're here today because you and Craig Ramsey were probably the foremost penalty killers ever, probably in the NHL, certainly the Sabres. How did that come to be? I mean, by the way, we should probably back up to know that he didn't start off as a Sabre. Part of your world was with the Rangers and the Red Wings. Start us along a little your biographical path.
Oh, well, you know, back then I left home at 14 to play junior in Kitchener. It was called the Kitchener Rangers at the time. It still is, actually. And in 1966, they had a draft. It was actually basically the first draft they ever had. And I was drafted by the Rangers. Turned pro with the Rangers. Now, I played a year in the minors in Omaha. Back then, you had to play 40 games in the minors before you could play in the National Hockey League. They made one exception to a decent hockey player named Bobby Orr. But they made that exception for him, but I don't know why. Anyways, so I played my time in the minors, and I got called up to the Rangers at the end of the second year. And then the Rangers had a very good team, and they were in a position of going for the Stanley Cup. And we had a real good team in Omaha. And they traded some of the younger players for older players. So I was traded to Detroit for Pete Stemkowski. And then I played a year in Detroit, and I asked to be traded. Was not good a situation in Detroit. And I came to Buffalo because Punch had seen me play, because his son Brent had played in London in the same junior league that I was in, and Punch had seen me play a number of times, and you know, he traded for me, and I guess that's the rest of it.
Well, that's just the beginning of it. So you got, you know, we think of you as kind of glove in hand with Craig Ramsey. How did that kind of moment happen?
Well, I think that, you know, like I finished my junior career, I finished third in the league in scoring. So, you know, as far as defensive go, I thought he was more of a two-way player than just a defensive player. But anyways, when Craig was drafted, he came to camp, he went down to the minors, and he came up, and actually Joe Crozier put us on the same line, and from that point on, we clicked. I noticed we had this ESP about wherever the other guy was, we seemed to know where he was, and so he was my roommate for 10 years, and we had a pretty good career together. You
also, because you were a scorer, I think may have even led the league one year in shorthanded goals. But tell us about the Rick Jeanneret moment. I can just hear it now, when you actually scored 2 shorthanded goals on the same penalty.
Yeah, we're playing the Washington Capitals in Washington, and Craig had scored the first goal, shorthanded, and then I had scored a goal, and then we took another penalty, and I scored 2 goals in the same penalty. And we won the game 4-0, and it was 3 shorthanded goals. And actually, I don't know if it's still a record or not, but my 3 goals came in 3 minutes and 29 seconds, and that was a Sabre record for a number of years. Might still be, I don't know.
What's that do for the goalie of the other side? I mean, at some point, you just keep coming at you. You know, you got this feeling that somehow there's going to be good because you got a penalty play, and boom, 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 this poor guy.
Well, I think that it kind of goes with like the checking line kind of theory. You're supposed to stop the other team's best line from scoring, and my philosophy always was that if I'm playing in their end, it's going to be very hard for them to score in my end. And so we always tried to keep the puck and do our work in the offensive zone. And back then, and probably still a little bit today, is that the offensive players, they don't want to play defense. They want to get the puck and go. So they're a little lackadaisical on the defensive side so you can get more chances. And that was our philosophy, that was Craig's philosophy. And so we always thought of ourselves as, not a checking line, but more of a two-way line.
During that time period, I'm going to just drop some names, and if you have a story of something you want to share, it won't be recorded, trust me. But you're there at the time when the Sabres were being launched, and we got the French Connection. In fact, Lee Coppola's, Lee here? Lee's out there? Is he? All right, Lee's got a story that somehow he claims that he gave the title French Connection, so we'll have Lee talk about that in a second. But talk about Gilbert Perreault.
Oh, Gilbert is great talent, just absolutely great talent. He could skate like the wind. The biggest thing about Gilbert was that he was a great guy. He was just an ordinary guy. Like he was a very talented player, but he was a great teammate. He didn't want the limelight or anything like that. He wanted to share it. And he was a great teammate. He could, many of the people here probably saw him rush end to end and carry the puck and make the moves he could make. Like I'll never forget that Floyd Smith said to us, called all the players together at practice and said, "Gilbert, tell us what you did to beat that defenseman." And Gilbert says, "I don't know, I just do it." So, he was just such a natural talent. He didn't, he just did what came instinctively to him. And, I don't think anybody could carry the puck as well as he could. He was just dynamic. He came to the camp one year, 240 pounds. And back then, you always, as some of the guys that play hockey know, you do these drills where you skate from side to side, and you do like 10 of them in a row. And so we do that, and of course, Gilbert is the fastest guy in the first one, but downhill from there. He was too out of shape, but even at 240, if you're a short distance, he was beating everybody.
He also could sing, couldn't he?
Proud Mary was his favorite song. Yeah, he would always, he loved to sing. I don't know why. Wasn't that? But he always thought he sounded like Elvis Presley. We had a number of guys on that team that could sing. Jim Schoenfeld had a record out, Make Love by the Fireside. And Jim Lorenz had a record, and Rick Dudley had a record. I mean, I didn't sing.
So I know one of his teammates there was Rene Robert, who was here a few years ago. Any idiosyncrasies about Rene we need to know about?
Well, Rene, we always got on Rene's back because he always seemed to have a chip on his shoulder. And so we'd always kind of egg him on with, like, if it was contract time and we were talking about contracts. Back then, nobody knew what anybody else was making. So, he'd come in and say, oh, yeah, I just signed a big deal with the Sabres, right? And he'd throw out some number, and then one of us would say, well, geez, they offered me this, which would be more than his number. Right? He would just get mad and start throwing things. So I don't know if you've been to the new arena in Buffalo, but they have the statues out front of the Connection, the second best line in Sabre history. And I said, Rennie, they screwed up that statue. And he said, what do you mean? I says, they forgot to put the chip on your shoulder. So, yeah, but he's a great guy. I played with Rennie in Toronto also after the Sabres, and yeah, he's a really good guy.
Okay, then Rick Martin?
Oh, Rico was a jokester. He was always pulling tricks, always. One time we were delayed at Denver Airport, and he would take a $50 bill and put it on a string and throw it on the ground and watch for somebody to pick it up and then start pulling it and start chasing it. And, we had a trainer named Frank Christie, and what he would do is, back then we had the training room was just off the side of the dressing room. And so someone called Frankie to take their leg or something, and Rico would go in and he'd put, it's called atomic bomb. It's like a heating thing for your muscles. It's really, really hot. And he would put it on the receiver of the phone. And then we'd go in out to the coach's room and we'd phone the training room, and Frankie'd run and get the phone and put it up, and you'd hear him scream. He'd come Rico was always doing that. I guess the best one was we were playing a game, actually, and before the game, Rico always worked on his sticks, always shaved them just to get him the way he wanted them. But anyways, Rick Dudley was on the team then, and so he took, back then they were wood sticks, so he took his saw and he sawed Rick Dudley's shaft of his hockey stick almost all the way through, but not quite. Right? So we figure, okay, it's going to break in warm-up. Well, he didn't take that stick for warm-up. Right? So we get in the game, and he gets a breakaway. And this is God's honest truth. He goes in, and he goes to take the shot, and it snaps in half. And Rico and I, because I saw Rico do this, right? We were just howling. We never told him.
So this is it. Today's the revelation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dudley was he could lose it pretty easily.
So Lee Coppola just came into the room. Lee Coppola, news reporter extraordinaire, and he was starting to tell the story, and then I got distracted about the French Connection. And Lee, what's the story of the naming of that?
Well, first of all, let me say that Don Luce and Craig Ramsey were the best penalty killers the Sabres ever had. Whelan used to rave about you, and I used to rave about you on the radio. And I interviewed Don in the locker room on occasion because I used to do a side job when I used to work part-time for the Sabres, but then I would go to the locker room and get interviews for UPI, so I would interview the players. Perro's great line was, he scored a game-winning goal once, and I wanted to know exactly how it happened because for the quote for the story, and I said, so Gilbert, I said, well, what happened on that goal? He said, puck on stick, I shoot. That was it. The French Connection's a funny story because one of my many jobs for under my boss, Paul Whelan at the Sabres, was to run the press box. And part of running the press box in the old Memorial Auditorium was writing the messages on the message board. And the message board used to announce goals scored by the team and out-of-town goals and things of that nature. And I was kind of like, because I was hired by Paul, I was a little wacky because I was in his vein of being wacky. So I would try to do things that were funny and stupid and things like that. But after they traded for Robert and you had the 3 Frenchmen on the line, everybody in the press box was trying to come up with names because at those days everybody had names and the Kraut line and things like that. That was a big thing, is to name the 3 guys on a name. And I remember one guy wanted to call them the Kid line because they were young, and somebody wanted to call them the Frog line because they were Frenchmen. And somebody wanted to call them the Pram line, Perrault, Robert, and Martin for baby carriages. And these were bantered around in the press box. Well, it just so happened my wife and I went to see the movie The French Connection. And a week later or something like that, I'm up in the press box and, bang, 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 they score. And so I put up on the message board, Perrault from Renee and Rick, it's a French Connection. And it stuck. I mean, people said that's a great way to do it. And you're talking about Rico. In later years, Rico was a member of the golf club that I used to play at. And Rico always had a cigar and a beer whenever he played golf. Well, he would come into the grill room, and if I was there, he'd come over and he'd put his arm around my shoulder and he'd say, "These guys made me a lot of money." Paul Whelan says hello, by the way.
Yes, I will.
I will. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you, Lee Capola. Appreciate it. So talking about Paul, that's the book I'm referring to. Then Perrault said to Rico, which Paul was here a few years ago as well, and his stories. Well, give me your best Paul Whelan story. Yes.
Well, I'm kind of mad at Paul.
Okay, good.
No, because back then, video just came in, and all our games were videotaped. But back then they had a policy where you'd send your game tape to another team that's playing the team that you just played. And also that from that era, Paul would just tape over our games, so we don't have any tapes of when I played, very few. So, but most every other team has an archive where from that era, there's not very many tapes of the game. But I didn't have any problem with Paul. I mean, I don't recall anything that was. We didn't really see each other that much, but when I played.
Were you involved at all when they announced this guy that didn't actually exist, when they drafted him?
Terry Tushimoto?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's Punch. Punch was a great guy. He had a hard persona. Like, everybody thought he was this hard-nosed person, but when you got to know the guy, he loved his players. Back then, I didn't have an agent. Agents were just starting to come into the business then, but I didn't have one. And when my contract was up, I'd be sitting at home, and Punch would call and say, on a Friday, he says, "What are you doing Monday?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, come on down to the office, we'll talk about your contract." So I said, "Okay." He says, "Be there at 10 o'clock. So I go at 10 o'clock in the morning, go down to his office, and he'd say, "I can trade you for so-and-so." And I said, "Well, if you think he's better than me, you should make that deal." And so we do this for half an hour, and then for the next 4 hours, we talk hockey. And I did that every day for like 3 weeks until I got my contract. But he just loved to play hockey. I liked to talk hockey and to get to know the players. He hated agents. So that was kind of good that I got to know him so well, better than probably 90% of the players, because I did my own negotiating. Back then, the salaries were a little different. My first 3 years in the league, I made $11,000, $13,000, and $15,000. Our whole payroll in '73 was $473,000, and the league minimum for one player now is $575,000.
Oh my.
I turned pro and I signed a contract that paid me $5,000 and to play in the minors, and I got a $3,500 signing bonus. And actually, one of the scouts that I work with, Rudy Miguel, he turned pro in 1948, the year I was born. He got $5,000 to play and $3,500 to sign. So in 20 years, it didn't go up very much. But then the WHA came in, and that helped boost our salaries.
So when you're out on the ice and you're playing the team, another team, and were there ever anybody, Don, that you said, "Oh my gosh, he's jumping onto the ice"? Sort of that, call it, remember the Flyers, and all those guys. You'd say, "Oh man, I hoping that we don't connect." Was there one or two guys that not that you were scared of, but you just assumed not to be out there with?
Well, yeah, but it's not the players you think. One of them was Gary Croteau, who is not a well-known name. He wasn't a fighter, but he was probably the best body checker in the league. When he hit you, you could get hurt. So you're always aware of that situation. But any of the other guys, like for myself, we always played against the other team's top line. So we really didn't have that, I mean, Ken Hodge was a tough guy and Cashman, but, it was more the guys that could do damage that might take a cheap shot at you. Like the tough guys, a lot of them weren't cheap shot artists. They would get mad if you did something and they do something back, but you just played the game. They just played the game.
Were you with the Red Wings when Gordie Howe was still playing?
Absolutely.
Talk about Gordie Howe. Yeah, we got a Red Wings fans over there.
Well, he's the best player that ever played the game. When I was with the Rangers, we played Detroit in an exhibition game in Kitchener, Ontario. And I was playing with Vic Hadfield and Rod Gilbert. And we're playing Detroit, and I got a chance to hit Gordie. And I hit him, and I knocked him down. And I was pretty happy about it. He's my idol, but I came to the bench and Vic Hadfield said to me, he said, "Son, forget about the puck." Because he's coming after you. And he did. He came 5 times that game, but he didn't get me. And Vic told me after, he said, "You're very lucky." But anyways, a month and a half later, I'm traded to Detroit. And we're at practice, and you always go down and take a shot and get in line, right? So I go down, take my shot, come to get in line, kind of got my head down a little bit, and I look up. He's got a stick right on my forehead right here. And he says, "You're the only player I never got back." But he is like this guy was the toughest guy in the league, fighting-wise. He was, if you finished in the top 5 in scoring in like 2 years in a row or stuff like that, you're considered a superstar. Like Crosby's done it twice in the top 5. And Gordie did it 20 times in a row. But he rolled a 300 game in bowling. He's a scratch golfer, and he hit home runs out of the Tiger Stadium without K-line. Just a great athlete, and just a great person. But he was also the meanest player in the league. He has probably more stitches on his stick than anybody over their career by a lot. He was a mean, tough guy when he played, but off the ice, you would never know it.
Talk about a few of these incidents again. In the 70s, I remember the fog game. Talk about those things which are, for Sabre fans of that vintage, they really remember. They're moments.
Well, that era was just terrific. For us as players, we didn't, the fans were like an extra player, because we were not only playing for ourselves to win, but the fans so appreciated us that we wanted to win for them. And the old auditorium was a great rink to play in because the fans were right there. And when we came out of the dressing room, the fans were there. You had to walk through them to get out of the building and stuff. So we had a very special relationship with our fans back then. It was, they'll never have it again, because now the players go out the back door. In the bigger rinks, they don't allow the players to be seen by the public or their fans as much as they should. But the Fog game was just like, it's amazing we did it. I mean, you could, at times you couldn't see anything. You could just see the top of the guy's shoulders or something, and you had to guess where the puck was. And then we get the wet towels and skate around, try and lift the fog. And it was a dangerous game.
So, as you look back, Don, on this incredible Buffalo Sabre Hall of Fame career, are there a couple other games that sort of stand out to you?
Oh, yeah, I mean, playing in the Stanley Cup final was great. When we played the Russian teams, we beat them 12-6 and 5-1. Those are great games, but I think the biggest thing about then is like the fans and your teammates. That's the thing you miss about the game. You miss the camaraderie, the kibitzing in the dressing room. Everybody is together with one goal in mind, to win the game. And back then, everybody kind of lived near each other, so you could babysit kids, and had support systems and things like that. And what made our team so good at that time was our chemistry. We all got along. We all appreciated what each other did for the team and for each other. So
you're now working with a team called the Toronto Maple Leafs.
No, I am not.
You're not?
No.
Were you?
I finished my last year with them. They asked me to. They had just made their amateur scout, chief scout, the head pro scout, and he had no pro experience. And I was finished with Philadelphia, so they asked me to come on and mentor him to get used to being a pro scout, because there is a difference between pro and amateur scouting. So I did that for a year, and then I retired.
Well, we're looking for an executive director at the Robert Jackson Center. Put in your resume. We could work you in. Any specific questions for Don that somebody would like to ask?
Don't be afraid.
Yeah, don't be afraid. This is the one. Randy Anderson. Did he say something that we should hear about?
He did. He told us at this table what he's doing now. Even though he claims he's retired, he has a new gig that I think we're all interested in.
Well, yeah, I started a business called EC Sports Consulting, and it's basically mental training. If you ask an athlete, they'll say the game is 80 to 90% mental, yet 99.9% of the training is physical. And it doesn't make any sense to me. The brain controls the body. I've always been interested in the brain and how powerful it is. And with my business, we can take mental blocks away. We help people overcome things that they don't even know what's causing them themselves. Like, a lot of pressure to athletes can be put on by parents, agents, even coaches, and we can take those blocks away and allow the player to become the best he can be. As far as I know, there's nobody else that's doing this. It is kind of revolutionary, but we can do it very quickly. We've worked with a number of athletes. I told a story at the table there that we had a golfer that in 1948, Ben Hogan set the course record at a course in Buffalo of 64. And we had this young golfer, Bill Gaffney Jr., and he was a very good golfer. But anyways, he was working with us because he had some problems with his game and not being able to, after making a bad shot, it would take him a couple holes to recover to get back to his game. Well, we took that away, and then he went and shot a 61 and broke that record. So hopefully it's a growing field, but you know, I always say the mind controls the body, and we don't develop the mind in sports. We just, you know, right now, players, I mean, we know what they have to drink after a game to be rehydrated. We know what they can eat. We know how to make them stronger. All that physical stuff is pretty much it. You can't go any further. But if the mind's not in the right place, the body's not, no matter what kind of shape it is. I told a story also of a player that was drafted by the Sabres when I played, and he was an Adonis. He came to camp, he was 212 pounds. He was maybe 5% body fat. We always had testing, and he got on a treadmill, and they just said they had to stop the treadmill because he would just keep going. Nobody had ever done that. But then when he got on the ice, he could only stay on the ice for 15 seconds. So physically, you knew he could stay a lot longer, but he had a mental block. He couldn't get over that mental block, and he never really played. But yet his body was probably the best conditioned athlete at that time that I'd ever seen. So
We're going to conclude by you giving us your best Rick Jeanneret story.
I mean, what is broadcasting, or can I give a Scotty Bowman story?
Sure, absolutely, please.
Well, when Scotty was coaching and stuff, he always had a trick. You know, back then we'd have a curfew, say like 11 o'clock, and you know, before some guy would sit in the lobby and stuff, and that would deter players from going out. Well, Scotty figured that was too obvious, so what he would do, he'd get a stick from the trainer, go to the bellhop and say, look, can you get this signed for me? I got some people I got to give this stick to. But he would give the stick to the bellhop at like 5 minutes to curfew. So when he got the stick the next day and the players' names were on it, he knew they were out after curfew.
Nice. Did Jeanneret have any calls for you? Did he, you know, Luce or anything like that? Did he?
Well, yeah, he did the Luce. I was playing. I didn't.
You ever listened to him? You never ran upstairs to see what Rick was doing?
They didn't have the radios on the bench at that time.
No Mayday moments.
Not that I know of. I mean, like, they made the record there. You're going to win that cup. That's all. But no, not that I know. Well, Ted Darling did a lot of the broadcasting then when I first came to the Sabres.
What's a question I should be asking you that I haven't yet?
I have no idea.
How long did Mogilny stay with you and Diane?
Well, he stayed for about 3 months. When he got his place, which was just actually around the corner from our house, my wife took him shopping, and she says, you know, we'll get some stuff for the morning. And she came back and she said, well, he filled 3 carts. He went to the grocery store and he would fish, lobster, everything. He thought it wasn't going to be there in the morning. Yeah. When I was in Moscow, before the wall came down, right beside the Kremlin, the Red Square, is a huge mall. Like, it's huge. And when I was there was 3 places in it. There was a place that sold bread, a place that sold meat, and a place that sold souvenirs. And I've always wondered when I was there why everybody walked around with a shopping bag. And so we had a Russian scout, so I said, why has everybody got these shopping bags? He says, well, if there's meat for sale, they don't go back to their job. They go get in line. Now that mall was like maybe the length of the Galleria Mall plus some. And that one shop, if it had meat, that line would be all the length of the building inside and out and still growing. And you'd go to the front of the line and the guy would just take a brown paper bag and put it on the table. And you took it. You didn't even know what was in it, but you took it. Because if you didn't take it, the person behind you is going to take it. They didn't know if they'd have any more. Like, it was just unbelievable how destitute, and like when we drove in from the airport in Moscow, when this behind the wall, it was like pitch black. There was no lights, nothing. It was just road, and it was like 6 lanes wide on each side, and no lights on the cars. They wouldn't turn them on because it wrecked the battery. So it was quite an experience, and you know, I went there and I was there for maybe 2.5 weeks, and I had changed $50 US into rubles on the black market, and I had 25 left when I left 2 weeks later. Like, the hockey game at that time was 3 cents to get in US. You know, now you go to Moscow and it's a different story. That is like Vegas. There's so many lights and everything else, and it's come a long way. But back then it was like Alex's parents lost their jobs. They call their houses, they're really apartments, but they had to break a window and make pipes come into the center of the room to build a fire to keep warm because they had no money. You know, it was a tough time. I mean, it took a lot for Alex. You think at 19 years old, you leave a country, you're going to a country that you don't really know anything about, and you don't speak the language. That's actually, we did ask Fedorov to come with us, but he chickened out. He wouldn't come. But you know, that took a lot of nerve to do what he did. No one had ever done it, and he was really a brave kid at that time.
Well, you're wonderful to come down to share this story, to add to what Jerry Meehan was attempting to do. We'll find an extra one of those DVDs. Make sure you get it so you can see what you look like on all of that, and all of that. And we have autographs that Don has signed up here with Randy Anderson. And if you'd like to come up and get those, and maybe he'll stay for a few minutes to inscribe them. So to Don Luce, thank you very, very much.